students rallied around them. Images of the young people ready to die in protest transfixed the world. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was to arrive the next day on May 14th. The world press was in Beijing to cover the historic visit, marking the end of the long rift between the Soviet Union and China. The summit turned into a terrible humiliation for Deng Xiaoping. Welcoming ceremonies for Gorbachev were held at the airport instead of in Tiananmen Square. What should have been a triumph for Deng was completely overshadowed by the thousands outside who were now calling for his resignation. The crisis escalated as students all over the country marched in support of the movement in Beijing.
People acted out of conscience. They wanted to do something for the country. The students were in their prime, but they were risking their lives on a hunger strike. So we had to do something too. It was the most exciting time of my life.
Our boss didn't want us to stop working. He was suspicious of the movement. Since we weren't allowed to go downstairs, some of us threw money out of the window. Who knows if the students got it? We joked there was so much cash floating in the air, it looked as if it was snowing.
Thousands of students from provincial cities poured into Beijing.
By then, Beijing had become the center of a national movement. We had to stand together with Beijing and set up contacts. In Tiananmen Square, the student organizations were in chaos. It was because it was a spontaneous movement. Many students were enthusiastic after they got there, but they were not well organized.
Tiananmen Square became a world unto itself. Beijingers had never seen anything like it. The entire city seemed to march in support of the students. Workers from steel mills, teachers, doctors, housewives, even the staff of the Communist Party's official newspaper, the People's Daily.
We walked to Tiananmen, where it was a sea of people. I remembered how I had joined the demonstrations in the late 1940s, but that was under the rule of the nationalists. The slogan we shouted back then was, "We want freedom and democracy." I thought, my goodness, after so many years, we've gone full circle. And now we're back, shouting the same slogan.
By the middle of May, 3 weeks after Deng had condemned the demonstrations, the crisis was at a stalemate. Many students wanted to return to campus to try to negotiate with the government. But the radical students refused to leave. The government also was sharply divided over what to do. Zhao Ziyang indicated he wanted to negotiate.
He was more informed about the situation. He knew what the students were thinking. He had many contacts with them. That was why he hoped that there would be a moderate way to convince the students and to get better results.
得到一个更好的结果。
As the government watched, the crisis escalated even further. Workers began to make their own demands, forming labor unions and holding their own demonstrations in the square.
现在已经到了建立一个工人自己的工会，这个工会敢于，请注意"敢于"这个词啊，敢于为工人说话。
在工资联，我是
We formed a standing committee for the Workers' Autonomous
工资
Union.
联的筹委会。我当初在竞选工资联常委的时候，
When we ran to be on the committee, I said,
我们应该知道，我们现在在这儿
we're not electing someone to a position, or a right, or a status.
不是一个什么权利，也不是一个地位，而是
We're selecting who will have the longest prison terms,
谁会多做几年了，
or who will be shot dead first.
早一点被枪毙。我说这可能是我们
That will probably be the result of our election.
结果。
What seemed like a life or death crisis in Beijing meant little to the majority of the population who lived in the countryside. In the middle of the protests, Shen Weirong returned to his village for family reasons.
In villages like ours, the student movement did not mean a lot. My mother and my grandma did not care much about politics. They were only concerned about my well-being.
I didn't agree with the student movement opposing Deng Xiaoping. It was only after Deng came to power that my son could go to college based on his own merits.
Freedom and democracy were too far removed for them. They had no concept of such things. They'd say, "What kind of freedom do you want? You are in college. You can say and do anything you like. What more freedom do you want?" I could not communicate with them.
By May 18th, the hunger strikers had been without food for 5 days. Finally, that day, the government invited student leaders to a meeting.
而且我也差不多讲了我的观点。如果你们认为你们自己在座的这些同志不能够完全左右他们的行动嘛，那我就是通过你们。
那么我现在想提醒您，刚才说纠缠这个问题，我们学生提来只是从人道的立场上说解决这个问题。 纠缠的问题，所谓纠缠在一些某些实质问题上。
While Wu Erkai-shi was speaking, I watched Li Peng's face and saw him flush with anger. I think the students must have enjoyed seeing him so upset. I certainly did. The atmosphere at the meeting changed. This was not a dialogue, but a serious confrontation.